and welcome back to 209 Prep Sports. In the studio with Scott Bryan again this week. It's been a while. And so basically, this is our intro to the new season. We've made some, when we initially started this podcast, our thought process was to cover as many sports as we could. And in the spring, we talked about that we'd be kind of, taking a step back a little bit and just focusing on football. And really at this point, we've decided that, so we can do our best to make sure that we're covering, the sports as accurately and as concise as possible. We've decided to narrow it down to the TCAL, the SJ2A, the VOL, the MLL, and obviously we'll cover the TVL and some of the other local teams, like, for instance, obviously I coach at Linden, and so we'll cover Linden even though we're in the SDL. So we're going to try to stay more central to the Stockton area, Stockton-Tracy, Lodi area. And it's twofold. For one thing, I think that when we get a little bit too spread out, I don't think that we do as good of a job as we could possibly do and giving these kids, adequate coverage. And secondly, it's a lot of work for us to try to get in under the hood and make sure that we're, since we can't attend as many games, and this will be hopefully we'll get to that a little bit more with COVID, with how this is going to change. Hopefully we're able to do some more in-person games, which also will afford us the opportunity to kind of interview coaches and players after games that we are able to attend.
Yeah, this is going to be. I'm really excited about this year and getting to cover local football. I agree. It's, I think initially we kind of thought we could tackle, covering all prep sports, but hopefully somebody else will take the reins and start covering some of those other sports. But like you said, our focus is going to be on football in the 209, and there's going to be there's a lot there. And with COVID, hopefully the COVID restrictions are going away and all the games are going to get to be played. I think if that's the case, then there's going to be a lot to talk about this year. And there's a lot of players that are very eager to have a full season, just like in any other sport. That's not to say that we don't want to still highlight local athletes who are doing things that are going to go beyond high school. We still want to hear from those athletes that are committing, whether, obviously football, but it would be great to hear from athletes that are committing in other sports, whether it be volleyball, golf, baseball. I think this community, the greater Stockton area and the surrounding towns, I think take a lot of pride in their high school athletes that go on and play beyond high school. So that's still something we want to hear from everyone on, and we're gonna keep highlighting our email address and different ways to contact us. We've got the social media platforms, and we're gonna be monitoring those and keeping things up to date there. So I'm super excited about this year. It's going to be fun to go sit in the stands with other fans and watch the games, and parents get to cheer on their student athletes. It's going to be a good year. I'm very optimistic for the way this is going to play out.
Yeah, and I think for us, for Scott and I both, like we said, this was, we created this podcast out of a passion for our passion for sports, and our hope is that we can create a really good podcast focused on, a smaller demographic or a smaller group of teams, and then it evolves, so like this, for instance, we have a if you want to call him a historian or an expert with the TVL, Frost helped us out quite a bit last year, and we're going to rely on him again this year. Hopefully we'll have a weekly interview, or maybe even get to a point where he can, do a TVL preview weekly for 15 or 20 minutes, and we just plug that in and we add an additional podcast that week or whatever it may be. So that, we'd love to evolve to the point where we find somebody that knows a lot about the TCAL and a lot about the Valley Oak and a lot about the SJ2A, or somebody who's an expert or at least a historian on the Motherlode League. So we're this is our olive branch to reach out to the community. And if you have an affinity for your league, and you have some knowledge and are willing to do some work, Obviously it's not going to be paid, but it's going to be paid with love and smiles.
There you go.
But, for us, we just really want to get to a point where we're giving adequate coverage and making sure that, people that are in the know that, they're able, and not from an opinionated standpoint, but from a factual standpoint where you have, you're seeing it with your own two eyes, and, obviously you're going to report it the way you see it. But, for us, it would help this become, we want this to be the best podcast that we can possibly be.
And we get a lot of our information off of Max Preps, but I think everyone knows that not all coaches, whether they don't have the time or it's just not something they feel is of high importance to them, not all the information gets posted there. We hope that keeps improving, because that's a great platform for statistics, for wins and losses. It really gives fans a chance to follow the teams, but it's also a recruiting platform too for a lot of athletes. But we'll highlight basically the 4 leagues, like Chris was saying, with the exception of Linden's not in those four conferences. So we're going to be following Linden, but in the, just a recap of, and we'll go through the course of this podcast, but the first one that we'll highlight is the Trans Valley League. And just as a recap of the schools that are in the Trans Valley League that we'll be covering, the Escalon Cougars, who got to have like a lot of other teams, got to have kind of a makeshift season, capped it off with a absolutely fantastic game against Oakdale. It was a game that was a long time coming. The coaches from both those schools are, I think, 2 of the best coaching staffs in the area by far. So Escalon Cougars, Hillmar Yellow Jackets, another school that is really fun to watch. Houston Huskies, hopefully that's a school with a deep history in football, going all the way back to Ryan Franca and those state ranked teams that he had. Livingston Wolves, Modesto Christian Crusaders, probably known more for their basketball program, but I know that they've put together some pretty good seasons over the last 20 years or so. Ripon Indians, I believe we can still call them the Ripon Indians as of right now. Hopefully they don't become the Ripon Guardians, because they'll always be the Ripon Indians to me. And then the Riverbank Bruins. So TVL, it's going to be a great chance to see a lot of good football in that conference this year.
And we're at a point with this whole thing for us is just to make sure that we're, we started it with the idea of making sure we highlight athletes. So, with that being said, there's this last, 4 or 5 months has been nutty, in the area for offers. You have a kid like, Jamarian Briggs at Lincoln, who went into the spring season with 1 offer from Fresno State. And so he has, and he verbally committed to Fresno State. Jamarian goes to pretty much any and every camp he could go to that was locals. And there was one at San Jose State, Sac State, Fresno State, and a lot of other colleges attended. So you have the UCLAs of the world, and Arizona's all going to these other schools to go to these camps. Well, Joe goes off, and he just ends up with offers to Arizona, UCLA, and pretty much any school he wants. I think Oregon. There were a handful of other schools that offer. I think he's got 8 or 10 offers now at this point. And so I just read yesterday that he decommitted to Fresno State, and I'm sure that a lot of people look and say, "Oh, well, they're not loyal." But the kid is a dude. Like he should be able to spend his next 4 years wherever he chooses to, and if it's Fresno State, good. I mean, good for him. That's where he wants to go. But if at some point in your life, if other opportunities to present yourself, you can't fault somebody for wanting to chase whatever dream that person has.
Yeah, and I think for me, who I have 2 daughters who have both gone through the recruiting process, who are now both Division I athletes, and you've got a daughter that's a Division I athlete, and 2 sons that are going through the process as we speak. And so it gives you a different perspective on what these kids go through. So, for him to make that decision, there's a lot of things going on. And when you mix in the year that we had last year, the COVID year, where where these kids are no longer really on this recruiting spectrum because it did not exist last year. A lot of the recruiting just was word of mouth. It was huddle. It was watching games online. These recruiters weren't really able to go out and see these athletes. And so now as things are loosening up, things change a lot. And it's kind of sad because one of the things that we've seen, another thing that we've seen because of COVID, and this is going to be interesting to see the way that it plays out, is fall sports athletes at the college level, and I can only speak for the Division I college level, we're given an additional year of eligibility.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they get to play an additional year in their sport. That means that the NCAA says if a school chooses to offer a fall sport athlete an additional year to play there, they can do that. Now, not all schools are doing it.
Yeah.
And not all schools are offering scholarships to do that. And so the schools that do, that causes a backlog, and that puts those kids that were this last year in recruiting, because you had the seniors last year probably already knew where they were going.
Yeah.
But the juniors and then the sophomores behind that were kind of stuck in this vortex, because now these Division I schools are like, well, we've got our classes because we can bring these kids back and not worry about it.
Yeah.
And that puts those kids that are juniors and sophomores on an island of the unknown.
Yeah.
Like, they don't know if they're going to get a chance to play at the next level. And if they do, is there any scholarship money available? Because the eligibility and scholarships are two different things.
Yeah.
And the NCAA didn't give schools more money
or COVID money.
Yeah, more. So it's really tough, and what these athletes have to endure is I would say borderline tragic. If you're stuck in that situation. But we're seeing kids, case in point, that have found a way to go out and make it happen, attending camps, getting your name out there, busting your ass. Whatever it takes, and good for him.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's gonna end up wherever he's supposed to be.
Yeah, there's a bunch of kids too, man. I mean, I've watched a lot of local football, whether it be camps or 7-on-7 or high school games or whatever. There's a lot of talent in our area that just haven't, and I'm not going to sit here and cry about it, but my own son, is a pretty decent athlete and playing quarterback at St. Mary's and has 0 offers, not even interest. I mean, he hasn't got a letter to look or nothing, and it's probably, he transferred, as a sophomore, and, and then we had a shortened season and split time. There's a lot of reasons that could be, and like you just mentioned, part of the problem at the college level, I don't know the numbers for football, but I do know the numbers for softball, is the transfer portal. So at one point, kids decided that they didn't want to be at the school that they'd already played at the previous year, and they're allowed to put themselves into the transfer portal. And so kids are putting their names in. Well, at one point, there were 1,000 girls in the transfer portal. As of last week, there's 750 girls still in the transfer portal, and school's already starting to start for the schools that are on semester programs. They start this month.
That's a and I think you're bringing up a situation that is extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
When you're a college athlete and you make the decision, and it doesn't matter what sport you're in this case, softball, there's, like you said, there's over 700 girls in the transfer portal. And as school is starting now, if they haven't found a home, I'm afraid a lot of them aren't gonna find a home.
Or you're gonna have to walk on somewhere. And did you leave a situation that was better for something, it's like that greener pastures type of thing. The second thing that's going to factor in now, and we just saw it this last week, is for the elite player is, Quinn Ewers is the number 1 quarterback in the country, and he opted out of his senior year at high school at Carroll High School in Texas to early enroll at Ohio State because of the NIL. So he can now the collegiate athlete can make money off their likeness and image. And he didn't want to wait. He was like, "My time's now. I'm gonna strike while the iron's hot."
Yeah, and the other side, the flip side of that is you see the athletes that go to college and they're 1 and done, or they're 2 and done, and they go on the NFL. I think on that side of things that the NIL and let me just put my opinion of the whole thing out there. I'm in favor of the NIL,
Yeah.
100%. It's about time. But beyond that, I think it's good for the schools that have done everything they can to treat their athletes right. And because you always hear about, the number one running back in the country, he's a sophomore at, anybody. Let's say a sophomore at LSU, and he's the number one running back in the country. Well, why would he stay in school if he's got a chance to sign a multi-million-dollar contract to leave school?
Yep.
Well, now he's got a reason to possibly stay in school because he can make money on his name, image, likeness, and stay there and get his degree, possibly maybe stay another year. And all that effort that school put in to recruit him and get him there, they're going to get more out of him.
Yeah.
And so on that side of things, I think it's advantageous for the schools.
Yeah, you have a bunch of football players now that have become multimillionaires in college, and the reality of it is the NCAA used to make all that money on their own, and the kids are, at the kids' blood, sweat, and tears, and now the kids are actually starting to capitalize on that. So I think it's good in a lot of ways. It's opened up Pandora's box in a lot of ways. I think anytime you make a decision that's paramount or that could, and there's a trickle down effect, so how it affects other things, and we're talking about the absolute elite too, so it's not going to affect a lot of people, but it is a factor. Mm-hmm. So getting back to our area, not to get on a soapbox and talk about at the national level, but our area, let's talk about the top ranked football players in our area this year. And we're kind of going to bounce around a little bit today, kind of just hit all the high points, but the top rated football player in the state of California in our area is Jaden Marshall at St. Mary's. He's number 17 in the entire state as ranked by 247 Sports. Jonah Coleman is 37. He's the running back slash slot at Lincoln, and I'm sure he'll play some defense for them. And then the aforementioned Jamarian Briggs, Joe's cornerback at Lincoln. This kid is ranked 102 out of everybody in the area, and Joe is, I think he's got like a 42 or a 44-inch vertical leap, just a phenomenal athlete. So, and I'm not going to sit here and brag on him, and then you have Blake Nicholson, who's just picked up a bunch of offers. Blake's not ranked in the top 100, but I've seen this kid play since he was like 10 years old, and he used to tear up our youth league, just faster than everybody. And then his body changed, and he's a bigger, stronger kid, but still fast as all get out. And so he's now got picked up offers, I think, to Oregon State and Fresno State and a couple of others. And, some of the schools are looking at him to play receiver. Some of them are looking at him to play backer. So, we're a hotbed here, and there's a lot of other kids that are going to end up getting offers, and that's where we pride ourselves in making sure we highlight those kids and get them out in front of people and do our best to share their statistics and their successes on social media and on our platform, and hopefully it's shared other places. So, we're just one of those other people, one of the other cogs in the machine trying to help these kids get to the next level.
Yeah. Speaking of teams that we're going to be covering, another group of teams that we'll be covering this year is the Valley Oak League. And I have to say this, I think the Valley Oak League is one of those conferences that really has balanced itself out, more so than most other conferences. When you look at the teams that are in here and the recent success, and when I say recent, I mean, maybe the last 5 years, success that these programs have had, it speaks for itself. So in the Valley Oak League, you've got Central Catholic Raiders. They're year in and year out, they're always considered one of the area favorites. They always, it seemed to, in the past, they used to always dominate in the area. But then you've got East Union Lancers, who in recent years have really presented themselves as a very good program. Kimball Cougars, we spent a lot of time talking about Kimball last year and the quarterback. And I imagine we will again this year.
Yeah.
That's a great program. Manteca Buffaloes, another storied program that, you go back to some of the previous years when Eric Reese was the head coach there and winning section championships and really, kind of steamrolling the league a little bit. I expect them to really come back and do some great things. Oakdale Mustangs, Trent Merzon and his crew, they are always a tough out when you play them, and maybe that's not a good way to explain Oakdale as a tough out. I think you say more on the winning side. Oakdale is usually the favorite when they take the field. Another team that I was kind of referring to and balancing out the league is Sierra Timberwolves. Sierra really has, in recent years, they've done a great job of putting a really good product on the field. And then you round it out with the Weston Ranch Cougars, who I think that campus has some really great athletes walking on campus there. So that's a league that I think at any given time you can go to a conference game, and expect a really good football game.
Yeah, I mean, you already mentioned. I mean, you got Central Catholic, Oakdale, and Manteca are the three-headed monster down there, and then you have teams that have stepped up in the last couple of years. Kimball has a phenomenal offense; they run it well with Nick Coronado and Willie Clifton out there, and Kimball's got a new coach in this year, so it'll be interesting to see how the evolution of that. The crazy thing about those teams is they're a D3 level, but most like Central Catholic, Manteca, Central Catholic, Manteca, and Oakdale will play just about anybody. I think Central Catholic's got a couple of big D1 schools on their schedule. They played the Holy Bowl with St. Mary's.
But then they got to come back and compete in their own league. It's a tough league, man. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch that.
Well, they don't get a lot of Friday nights off there, So you're not, so there's a lot going on, and then you have, we'll kind of keep the ball moving a little bit with the TCal, or the SJ2A. I'm sorry. So the SJ2A, you have Franklin, the Yellow Jackets. You have the Edison, McNair, Chavez, West, or not West. Who's the other couple that I'm missing? We'll get back to that. I dropped the ball. I'm trying to pull it up on my phone, and Max Preps isn't gonna let me get it to it.
I want to take a second to talk about Franklin and Edison, because those are two schools that, Edison, for example, Coach Guyton is really created a culture of winning there. They have a great stadium now, but Coach Guyton has really done a phenomenal job of putting a good team on the field week in and week out. Expect great things from them. Franklin High School is, anybody that's listened to this podcast in the past knows that it's kind of got a soft spot in my heart, because they've always have had to try to compete with, minimal, whether it be minimal athletes, minimal facilities, all the above. I honestly think that in the next 5 years, I think you're going to see some tremendous Franklin football teams. And the reason why I say that is that anybody from the area knows, who's driven down Highway 26 and looked at what's going on there, they're probably going to have the best stadium in the area this season. Hopefully this season, if they can get it done.
I don't know if it's going to be, if it's planned, and maybe mid-season it might be planned on getting done.
All I got to say is it's about damn time, because Franklin, if anybody deserves new athletic facilities, it's this school. And I'm so excited for these guys. They're getting, they're getting new football stadium, new track. And then not this softball baseball season, but the following softball baseball season, they'll have brand new facilities for those two sports as well. So just wanted to throw it out there. I know if Greg Marsh is listening right now, he's probably saying right on. He's a great coach, baseball coach in our area, and I know he's super excited for this to happen as well.
Since I choked on which teams are in the SJ2A, we'll revisit that. It's Bear Creek, Chavez, Edison, Franklin, McNair, and Stagg. And you would think I'd know that, because when I coached baseball, I played nearly all those teams every year. But I got old man brain now. So
yeah. Before we go over the TCal, which will be the last one we go over, and of course, like we mentioned, Linden is a team that we'll be covering that's outside of these conferences. But just real quick, one of the things that I'm excited about this year on our podcast is, last year we would finish most of our shows picking an athlete of the week, and that really went off of just us kind of compiling some statistics and trying to spread the wealth, if you will. But we're going to take it a step further this year, and we're going to have an athlete of the week, and the athlete of the week they're going to get a 209 Prep Sports T-shirt and a gift card to possibly Starbucks or maybe Papa's Pokey, one of those places. So I think that's going to be a really fun thing, and if throughout the season you really are passionate about somebody possibly getting that award, we want to hear from you. Tell us why they deserve it. Maybe the statistics from that game don't tell the whole story. Maybe there were things that were done that you won't find on a stat sheet, and that would make them a candidate for athlete of the week. So we're going to rely pretty heavily on listener feedback, and hopefully we get a lot of it. I think our listener base is growing, and hopefully we hear from everybody.
Yeah, we're really excited about the opportunity to get these kids a little bit of recognition for sure, but then reward them for the good week that they had. And it's always going to be difficult. There's so many factors that go into it. You might have a guy that rushes for 400 yards one week, but then a kid passes for 600 yards or something nutty, and it just puts us in a bad spot. So hopefully we can, with our sponsors and the help that we get, we can put out a couple of that particular week if there's, if they're deserving of it. We're not going to slight anybody because somebody else happened to have a great week that week. So we'll do the best we can to make sure that everybody's getting their accolades. But before we get to the TCAL and kind of wrap this thing up, there's a couple of things that we're going to have to, obviously everybody's concerned about with the new, the Delta variant of COVID and how that's going to affect things. And I'm not exactly sure that this is 100% correct, but I know at our school that we're going to start to test again weekly prior to the game. So we'll have to do a weekly test. And then, the numbers that'll be factored in. We're not, I'm not sure how they're going to do travel and those types of things. In the spring, we had some issues with, putting kids on buses and all of those things that we're actually been used to in the past, where that's how we get to football games and things like that. So we, as people, we had to make sure we made adjustments, and not everything always goes the way that we want it to go. And so for us, it puts us in a spot that this we may be right back to that, where we'll have limited fans, or at least, you might have to wear masks or whatever. But at the end of the day, and we've already started to mask up in the weight room and things like that to kind of get ahead of it and make sure that we're doing the things the right way. And it's not a political statement for us. It's about wanting to play football. It's about wanting, our kids have worked their butt off for the last 3 months, since we've been able to be in the weight room, and I don't want them to miss out, and so I think if we all kind of just, continue to pull the rope from the right, same direction, and understand it's really about the kids and making sure they get a chance to play and those types of things, and we just have to work within whatever the confines and the restrictions that we're given. So I don't know what those are going to be. I do know that they're coming, and I do know that there will be some mandates that are going to happen. Instead of fighting it, we all should remember we missed out on a whole fall season last year. So if we are afforded the opportunity to have a season this year, whatever that season may look like, we need to do what we need to do.
And we've got two more leagues to talk about real quick. I'll cover the Mother Lode League. We've got Amador Thundering Herd, which I think they have a new head coach. Coach Baker retired after many years as the head coach there. Argonaut Mustangs, one of the few schools in our area that in the last 20 years or so has won a section championship.
Yeah.
Bret Hart Bullfrogs. I think that number wise they may be down a little bit. This is not anything new or press wise or whatever.
Yeah, but it's but they actually don't have a varsity team this year. They just couldn't put the numbers together. And what I read on Twitter yesterday, that their JV numbers are relatively low too. So they're in a really tough spot in that. You're kind of abreast to it, but just them being so spread out. They have a school that's central, but then they have these outside communities that are so far away for kids to get back and forth to, and I would venture to say that the majority of people that live in Angels Camp commute to work, so it's not like they can commute, get their kids to practice on time, they're probably, while their kids are practicing, they're probably on the road.
Yeah, because when you look at the size of that district, you've got the Altaville community, the Angels Camp community, the Murphys community,
Copper.
Copper, yeah. So it's a large area, and I hope they figure it out, because Bret Hart's a great school, and I know the coaches are working really hard up there to get things together, and I hope this is just a hiccup, and things get back on the mend. Then we've got the Calaveras Redskins, and yes, until the day I die, will probably call them the Redskins. I know that they are considering a different mascot, but I'm just, I'm old school that way. But Calaveras is a school that year in and year out, they put a great football team on the field, and I don't see that being any different this year. And then Sonora, the league absorbed Sonora several years ago, and it was a shock because you had this football program that, and really all their sports, that just historically would dominate at times, and then they're stepping into a lower division, and then they just kind of took over. But I think the league has kind of caught up and balanced itself out. And then the Somerville Bears, which is another school that I really have a lot of respect for. They get it done up there. And I love the fact that, we were joking around earlier about how many schools in the area are named the Cougars.
Yeah.
Well, this is the only school around that we will be covering. That's the Bears. And so I really like the coach up there. He took the time to talk to us last year and gave us some perspective on what it's like to coach at a school that's really kind of, way up in the hills, and how hard they work to keep the kids engaged and involved. And so that's another school that I always like to see on the schedules.
Yeah, it's a difficult task, and that's Scott and I both grew up playing those schools in league, and so for us, we have a huge place in our heart for the MLL, and hoping that, again, I know Kelly Osborne's the head coach up there at Bret Hart, and Kelly's a good dude, man, and if anybody's going to help with the rebuild process, and you have Heath Lane, who is a Linden guy that's been really intertwined in the community. They have a lot of good people up there, and so they're it's going to be a tall task. I mean, and hopefully with the next realignment, they're given a little bit of a reprieve and put into a league that's a little bit more not maybe a smaller league, because even if they're 600 or 700, the reality of it is athletically, and the kids that are able to get to practice and stuff, it's probably in the low 2s or high 1s.
Yeah, and don't be fooled. I mean, Bret Hart has produced some amazing athletes over the years. Yeah. Most recently and most notably is TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah, TJ,
and their wrestling program, when Jan Schultz was the coach there, and I'm sure I'm not familiar with who the coach is now, but I'm sure they still have a very strong wrestling program. But TJ Dillashaw is probably the poster child for that program. And then and I apologize, when back in the 80s when I was in school, they had an Olympic skier from Bret Hart that made the Olympics. That was really a big deal. And for as soon as we're done here, I'll remember his name. But the point being is that Bret Hart historically has been very strong athletically. Yeah. And so this is just
Trevor Miller played baseball out of there. Ryan Kraft's still playing football. He's at Merced Junior College. He's a quarterback. Ryan's a hell of an athlete, and so they do have some studs, and it's, and I'm confident that at some point this will turn around. They're too good of people, too hard, too blue collar. They're going to figure it out before it's all said and done. So as we go out the door and kind of wrap this up a little bit with the leagues that we'll be covering, is obviously the TCal. And they're the monster of the Midway as far as we're concerned in this area. They're so talented. You start with Lincoln, the Lincoln Trojans, and you have Kenyon Nelson, and you have Jonah Coleman and Jamarian Briggs, and I could keep going. Tim Thomas is just transferred in. He's got a bunch of offers too. They got like 7 dudes with offers pretty much anywhere they want to go. St. Mary's, they kind of bang heads with each other all season long, nemesis. Trying to get the arch nemesis. You have Lodi Flames. Lodi, George Duenas is coaching that program up there at Lodi, and George has done a hell of a job. kind of putting it all back together, and their numbers were solid in the spring. They were super competitive. Tokay ends up hiring a new coach. Their old coach left, went down to Clovis, and is coaching with a former Tokay coach that got one of the Clovis jobs. I think it's Clovis East or Clovis West. Tracy Bulldogs. When we grew up, Tracy was they were just monsters, and
Wayne Schneider juggernaut is what they were.
They would just put it on people, and I think what happened, what happens with a lot of communities that are growing, you build more schools, so now they're competing. Now they have West, and they have Millennium, and they have, you can go down the list of high school Delta Charter. There's like 7 high schools or 6 high schools. Mountain House, is a whole brand new community. And just before we get ahead of ourselves, Mountain House at some point is going to be an elite team in this area, just because that community is humongous, and they have facilities and money and all those things. And then
I think along those lines too, I think Lathrop High School is probably
agreed.
As that community keeps to grow, Lathrop's another one to keep your eye on.
Yeah. Too. And then just finishing up, it's the West Wolfpack down there. So there's a lot that we'll be covering. We haven't made this easier on ourselves. We've just put ourselves in a spot where we think we can do a better job covering the teams that we cover. Obviously, we talked about, we'll add Linden. There's going to be, Ripon Christian we'll end up covering in D7, but they play, a lot of teams from down south, Orostemba, Mariposa, those types of teams. So for us to kind of keep, flowing our way towards Fresno, I think we're going to do the teams that we should be covering a disservice, because we're just spread too thin. So maybe at some point there's an evolution, and we broaden our horizons, and we find another team that would be willing to take on some of these other schools that we're not able to cover. But for now, we're going to keep busting our butt and doing what we love, and talking about the kids that that are working so hard to try to chase their dreams and maybe fulfill their dreams that are above and beyond playing at the high school level. So as we work our way out the door, don't forget, you can always reach us on Twitter. It's at 209 Prep. You can reach us on Facebook at 209 Prep Sports, and you can email us. I gotta find the email address.
And as he's looking for that, we really, really welcome any and all input from folks that are listening to the show on your team. Send us schedules, send us stats, send us updates, anything you want us to know and maybe discuss on the podcast. Send it to us, because we love to hear from you guys.
And just so we're all on the same page with this, we'll be rebranding ourselves a little bit, working on the logo, working on some other things. But I think that we've got the most traction on Twitter. Again, that's on Twitter. It's at 209 Prep. And then email us at prepsports209@yahoo.com. I think that, really, if you're really looking to follow the show and follow it as best as you possibly can, if you don't have Twitter, I'd suggest getting it for a multitude of reasons, if you're following prep sports or sports in general. Because Facebook's, when we do have a Facebook page for some of our audience, but it just is a little bit more, the platform doesn't really align as well as this does. So again, at 209 Prep on Twitter, and then prepsports209@yahoo.com. We'd like to thank everybody for listening, and let you know that we're going to keep plugging away and doing the best we can to cover your kids and all the schools in the area. Thank you.